dear students, myself Gangadhar Solanke, and I welcome you all to the MCGM's virtual classroom. So my dear students, today we are going to start with the subject political science, and in that today's our topic is post World War political developments. So in this chapter we are going to talk about the important historical events, that is World War First, World War Second, and about the Cold War. But before that, we just try to understand the concept of political science, or what exactly we are going to study in this subject. In the civics textbook, till now we have studied local self-government institutions, India's constitution, and our political system or government structure or the governmental structure. In local self-government institutions, we talked about the Gram Panchayat, Panchayat Samiti, Jilla Parishad, and also about the constitution, that is the importance of constitution, the concept of constitution, and the people who played an important role in writing the constitution of India, and also about the parliamentary system, judicial system of our country, that is the governmental structure. Now here in this class we are going to study India's relations with the world. Now when we say the word India's relation with the world, then what does it exactly mean? This relation may be economic, political, cultural, and we have to talk about all these things in the political science. Now in the world geography, you people study the geography of the world. Then in the history, you are now familiar with the global historical events, and in political science we are going to study India's relations. What we are going to study in political science? We are going to study India's relations with the world and some major global issues. This is what we are going to study in the political science. We are dependent on different persons for many things. Institutions like school, hospitals, or any other institute, and organizations. Now these organizations which are at local level, so which are at taluka or district level, but we are part of it, or we are directly or indirectly dependent on organizations, dependent on different persons like our family members, like teachers. So the people in society dependent on each other for different reasons and for different facilities. So interdependence is nothing but the relationship between two or more living things. Relationship between two or more living things where each one benefits from the other. एक को दूसरे से, दूसरे को पहले से, और दोनों को मिलके बाकी और लोगों से जहाँ फायदा होता है. Now this word benefits is very wide here. and then we call this interdependence. So our social life is interdependent, and mutual cooperation has very important place in it. Mutual cooperation and interdependent. Now this thing is similar to the countries in the world, just as it is true about individuals and society, that we are interdependent on each other. Just as it is true about individuals and society, it applies to different nations as well. So what does it mean? That the countries in the world which are interdependent on each other for different reasons, for different purposes. All the countries of the world are dependent on each other for one reason or the other. And these independent states also enter into treaties with each other. So a system of all these independent sovereign states comes up, and we call it international system. And in the international system, interdependence is an important feature of the international system or of today's global system. Countries around the world depend on each other for goods, for raw materials to make goods, and markets to sell goods. Now these three things, which exactly explains the concept of global market, that how the countries in the world are dependent on each other and for which things. The first one, which is goods, एक दूसरे से कुछ ना कुछ लेना ही होता है. कंट्री कितना भी डेवलप हो, सारी की सारी चीज़ें उनके पास नहीं होती है, किसी और से उनको कुछ ना कुछ लेना ही पड़ता है. देन फॉर द रॉ मटेरियल्स, अब किसी एक कंट्री के पास गुड्स भी है, रॉ मटेरियल भी है. देन व्हाट अबाउट मार्केट, उन्हें वो सेल करने के लिए तो एटलीस्ट किसी और देश के पास जाना ही पड़ता है. सो दिस हैज़ लेड टू ग्लोबलाइजेशन, द डेवलपमेंट ऑफ वर्ल्ड culture. Some people fear globalization will cause people to lose their own culture, but nowadays there is no option for this. It's practical thing and the world accepted it. International relations through foreign policy. Every nation has policies about its internal dealings as also about its relation with other nations, and such a policy is called foreign policy. How to deal with the neighboring countries and how to deal with the countries in the world with common interest, all these things are included in the foreign policy, and about this we have to study in detail in the next topic, that is foreign policy. Every nation adopts an attitude and mode of action towards other states which suits its peculiar circumstance and interest, that is foreign policy. Now here the question is, why to study history, or where we are studying historical events. The world in which we live today has been shaped through many events and developments. Hence, we need to go back to history in order to understand today's world. To understand the things in the present, it is always very important to look back into the history, because knowing the past helps you succeed in the present. So if we talk about the major or important events in the history of the world, we know that two world wars were fought in the last century. These were the most important events in the world in that century. The world completely changed because of them, and new current thought emerged. So here now in this lesson we are going to understand what else happened due to these world wars. Again, the same question on the screen: why study the First World War or any war? We are a generation who have never lived through a major war. War affects everyone: soldiers fighting for their country and those back at home. ऐसा नहीं है कि सिर्फ सोल्जर्स को ही वार में इफ़ेक्ट होता है, बल्कि पूरी कंट्री उसमें इन्वॉल्व होती है और सबको कुछ ना कुछ भुगतना पड़ता ही है. War changes the course of history. It can destroy countries, create new ones, or cause countries to take a different path. War changes individual lives. A whole generation of young British men were wiped out. If we do not understand the past, we will end up repeating the mistakes of the past. And not to repeat these mistakes, we are studying history. So now the First World War. The First World War was fought between 1914 and 1918. Major countries of Europe took part in it, which had a very central place in the international or global system at that time. The war caused a tremendous loss of life and property, which is as usual, and it happens always whenever there is war. The economies of victorious as well as the losing countries collapsed. The countries which joined the war suffered tremendous economic losses, and even the countries which did not join the war were impacted by the war. So the economies of the victorious as well as the losing countries collapsed. And in these countries involved in the First World War, divided into two groups in the Allied powers: Britain, France, Russia, Italy and America, and in Central powers: Germany, Austria, Hungary, Ottoman Empire and Bulgaria. Even the countries which did not join the war impacted by the war. And at the end of the First World War, all the nations felt that such a war should not happen again, and some measures need to be taken to achieve that end. Now, why this happened? Because war affected the world very badly, and not only the countries which involved in the war, but also the whole world. And that's why it is decided not to have such war again. On the screen, as you can see, Allied powers and Central powers: Ottoman Empire, Bulgaria, Germany in the Central powers, and Britain, France, Russia, Italy, America in Allied powers. Causes of World War: first, nationalism, that is pride in one's country, want to defend their country in time of war, think they are better than others, may attack other countries. So some measures need to be taken to achieve that end of the war. So, in that, an international organization called the League of Nations was established out of this thinking. It became an important platform to solve international disputes and carry out negotiations. The main responsibility of the League of Nations was understood to be to avoid war. फिर से दुनिया में वॉर ना हो ये देखने के लिए लीग ऑफ नेशंस फॉर्म हुई, which was established in January 10th, 1920, composed of 42 participants, aimed to reduce weapon arsenal of several countries to prevent war by means of collective security, to settle the conflicts among nations by means of negotiations and diplomacy, implement projects that would benefit society and humanity. Aims and objectives of League of Nations. The very important one, to establish world peace and security, to establish friendly and cooperative relations between the nations, to solve the international issues with peace, avoiding the wars. Obeying the international law, all the members or all the member nations are secular and independent, and for the sake of national security, all should follow the rules of League of Nations. As you can see on the screen, images related with the League of Nations. League of Nations was established after the First World War to establish peace, but it did not succeed at preventing war. After the First World War, major changes came about in Europe and outside Europe. Europe collapsed and new nations came into being. League of Nations did not succeed at preventing war. And because of all these things, autocratic regime came up in Germany, Italy, Spain and other countries. All these developments culminated in the Second World War. जो नहीं होना था, पूरी दुनिया को ऐसा लगता था कि फिर से वर्ल्ड वॉर ना हो, वही हुआ. And because of all these things, again, the Second World War was fought between 1939 and 1945. It proved to be far more destructive than the First World War. And not only was it more widespread compared to the First World War, but also more advanced technology was employed in this war, and that is why it was far more destructive than the First World War. Countries which took part in the Second World War once again faced a situation of economic crisis. America played a major role in the Second World War. It had manufactured nuclear weapons, and in order to end the war, it dropped 2 nuclear weapons on 2 cities of Japan, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, on 6th and 9th August 1945 respectively. So, among the many events that took place in the beginning of the Cold War, 1945 to 1991 is the long period of the Cold War. Here on the screen you can see the images of nuclear weapon used by America. The Second World War ended with the defeat of Germany in Europe and of Japan in Asia. So, among the many events that took place in the world after the Second World War was the beginning of the Cold War. And 1945 to 1991 is the long period of the Cold War. But about that, we'll study in the next session about the Cold War, effects of the Cold War, evaluation of the non-aligned movement, end of the Cold War, post-Cold War world, and the concept of globalization. Please subscribe the channel and press bell icon to get notifications. So my dear students, this is all for today. Thank you very much. Stay home, stay safe, take care.